One Twist Too Many. Story by J. E. Mile. Chapter 1. Worth the Wait. Fully engrossed in solitary hours of solemn recitations, 22-year-old Muntari curiously looked at the ornate clock which steadily ticked on the pale yellow wall. It was midday. The unclouded angry sun descended its burning rays on Kano City. Consequently, the windless atmosphere absorbed the ascending gleam refracted from scattered rooftops. Expanding rapidly over the past one decade, the bustling metropolitan city grew into a ringing commercial success in the entire savannah. A good deal of congested traffic spotted loud noises and wild undulating smoke in the atmosphere. Ancient monuments and modern towering buildings adorn many streets littered with hurried people. Most edifices gleamed with brick-painted walls and juxtaposed concrete sidewalks with flashing neon signs. A few buildings sparkled with graffiti-covered exteriors, and a tall skyscraper conspicuously masked the lost labyrinth of granite pyramids of yesteryears. Warm sweat ran down his lower temple, partly soaking his well-trimmed beard and wetting his lips. His squinted, clear eyes flicked through the verses as rapidly as they could, aligning well with his photographic memory. Sitting on folded legs like a monk, he savored the words he uttered and shuddered at their meaning. He had mastered the art of recitation from a tender age, bred by disciplined teachers and a thorough father. He suddenly stopped reciting and sipped some water from a glass cup he kept by his side. Who taught by the pen, taught man that which he knew not, he continued, reciting faster than the sound of a train at full speed. Although the squealing fan blades endlessly whirled hot dusty air on his sweat-gleaming face, his room brewed moisture fluctuations. Using a sweat-soaked white handkerchief, he cleared the cold sweat on his face. He had waited patiently for the NYSC call-up letter and found solace in long hours of daily Quranic recitation and endless supplications. Beep! A message came on his cell phone. He stopped reciting, sipped some water again, picked his cell phone and read the message. "I made it," he said aloud, running and screaming down the stairs. "I made it." Muntari's mother, Hajia Saudi, and his sister Yusra rushed out of their rooms distracted by Muntari's exhilarating joy. "Is everything all right?" Hajia Saudi asked, adjusting her wrapper with trembling hands. Yusra looked at Muntari over her mother's shoulder. "I'm going to get my call-up later," he excitedly answered and ran out of the house. "May the Lord be praised," his mother happily said, raising both hands imploringly. "This has indeed taken ages." Yusra joyfully held her mother's arms, mildly stamping her feet. "He has finally made it," she said, vigorously dancing. "He is lucky." Muntari zoomed to the Bayero University Senate building with his motorbike. Anxious groups of students thronged the frontal section of the busy building. They continually pointed at a large notice board and threw searching glances at pasted copious notices. "The list is out," went endless whispers in the air that gradually turned to loud murmurings. Muntari made frantic efforts to check the list, while the restless crowd swayed, pushing him back and forth. "Ah, I've been posted to Abuja," an elated lady said, and screamed at the top of her voice while adjusting her hijab. A young man stood akimbo and continually shook his head in disapproval. But why? He said, hissing aloud. I don't want to be posted out of Kano. More anxious, Muntari pushed his way through the crowd and perused the endless lists. Shouts of joy and regret rented the airtight, stuffy building. What? He suddenly said, sputtering sharp sounds, breathing heavily, and tightly holding the wrist of a man next to him. Cross River? Dazed, he shook his head for a moment and looked at a particular notice again, opening wide his eyes. I have been posted to Cross River, he soliloquized, unbuttoning his sweat-soaked jalabia collar. Warm profuse sweat had suddenly covered his neck. This is unbelievable. He pushed his way out of the crowd, walked to a nearby iron-made provision kiosk, and bought a bottle of cold water. Sitting on a low concrete platform by the kiosk, he opened the bottled drink with quaking hands. Cross River, he thought, slightly shaking his head and looking at the Senate building. You look worried, the kiosk owner said to Muntari. The former had amusingly been watching the agitated crowd of students, often smiling and shaking his head. Don't you like where you have been posted? He asked, and curiously looked at Muntari. Cross River, Muntari thoughtlessly answered, and gulped some of his drink. He looked down, breathing heavily. I have never set foot out of Kano. The kiosk owner laughed gently, leaning forward on the kiosk counter and clearing his voice. Don't you think this is the opportunity for you to explore other places? He asked, wriggling his index finger at Muntari. Muntari gently tossed his bottle of water with one hand and fanned himself with the other. Well, I seriously don't know what to do, he said. 24-year-old Adu slowly walked up to Muntari and the kiosk owner. He drooped his head, chin on chest, watching his pacer movement. Assalamu alaikum, he said, ordered for a chilled bottled soft drink, and sat next to Muntari. Where are you going? Muntari drably said to Adu. Cross River. Adu's cold response did not deter Muntari. They had been rivals in their class. Me too, Muntari said, and gulped more of his drink, gently shuffling his feet, pleased with what he heard. What do you mean? Ado's intense face gave in to a forced smile. I'm going to Cross River too, Muntari said, curiously looking at Ado, who got more excited. Wow, Ado said, keeping his bottle of drink by his side. We are going the same unfamiliar place to serve. We must bury the hatchet, friend. The kiosk owner giggled excitedly, tapping his counter once. That's what I'm talking about, he said, slightly nodding his head. You must explore new frontiers for our future generation. Our founding fathers did the same, and it is the reason we are closely knitted as a country. Consequently, the two friends finished off their drinks and walked slowly towards the campus main gate. Muntari merrily pushed his bike. The two friends intermittently asked other students about their postings and bade farewell. So, said Adu, when they arrived at the main gate, how do we start the journey? Muntari mounted his bike and sighed deeply. He looked up at the sky and down at the coal tar. I heard traveling at night to such places is more convenient. Traveling at night? Adu slightly scratched his head with his right index finger. Moreover, Muntari said, we have 2 days to resume at the camp. The earlier we tidy up, the better. You are right, Muntari. Let's keep each other informed about whatever happens in the meantime. Nevertheless, Here is my cell phone number. They parted after encouraging each other. Cross where? Muntari's mother tearfully asked later in the evening when he told her about his posting. Placing his right arm on a low six-legged side table opposite her, he sat on a fluffy patterned rug. The cool night air blew gently on his face, raising hairs and goosebumps on his skin. Every heavy breath he took echoed with his mother's voice. Using her crumpled wrapper, she wiped off the tears on her face and leaned back on the tufted soft sofa. No, she said, side glancing, simultaneously tapping her right index and middle fingers on the sofa. I don't want you to go there. Your father must do something about this. Assalamu alaikum, Muntari's father said, walking into the brightly lighted parlor. He kept his bag on one of the side tables and sat on a soft sofa beside his wife. Why are you wearing a long face? He asked after she answered his greeting. Why is everyone quiet? My dear, she said, sobbing and wiping off more tears. Our son has been posted to Igbo land for the youth service scheme. Igbo what? He asked. His jerked hand slightly hit the cup of water Yusra served him. The splashing water wet the hem of his babariga. Dad, Muntari said, moving closer to his father. Although Cross River is in the south-south, it is not an Igbo-speaking state. I browsed about that. What do you mean? His father asked, taking off his rimless eyeglass and keeping it on a side stool. Let me take you down the memory lane, boy. Fuming, he crossed his legs. Have you ever been taught the Nigerian Civil War at school? Yes, Dad. We overcame it. And shut up. You weren't born then, his father cut in. He sipped some water in the glass cup and briefly looked straight at Muntari, who was startled by the sudden interruption. Anyway, he said, wearing his glass, a phone call will solve this predicament. Dipping his hand in his big Babariga breast pocket, he brought out a cell phone and dialed a number. Hello, he said with a forceful smile. Fine, thank you. How can my son's NYSC posting be changed to Kano? Listening attentively, he nodded his head in affirmation for a while and gently tapped the rugged floor with his feet. Thank you, he said, and stopped the call. Blowing out his breath and keeping his cell phone on the side stool, he sank into the feathery cushions of the sofa. His wife anxiously moved closer to him, staring in disbelief. What's going on, dear? She asked, placing her clasped fist on her chest. It's too late to change our son's posting, he answered, removed his frill cap and threw it on the rug. He must report at the camp as directed by the NYSC before anything is done about changing his posting. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, his wife said, standing and placing both hands on her head. She slowly paced across the parlor and wriggled her fists. My son will go to a strange land. Inna lillahi. Calm down, my dear, her husband cut in and sipped some water. Furthermore, the camp will last for a month. Muntari will come back home soon, he said. How do I tell her? Muntari thought later at night on his way to see his fiancée Binta. What? Binta said, sobbing profusely. Cross River? No. Briefly, she shook her head sideways and wiped tears off her face. Why didn't you call me immediately? My parents would have done something about it. It's too late to change this posting, Binta, he said. No, she said, shaking her head sideways. Don't worry. I'll be posted back to Kano after the camp. Muntari said, My dear, she said, and wiped her nose with a handkerchief. You have to be careful with people there. He smiled, sighed heavily, and looked into her eyes. I will be very careful, and it's going to be all right, he said. She looked away, adjusting her hijab. We must get married a year from now, she said. Yes, we must, and immediately after my service here, Muntari said. The two bade each other farewell with heavy hearts and hoped they'll meet soon.